Our next unit study is the Renaissance and Reformation time period. In European history, the years 1350 to 1650 are known as the Renaissance period. The Renaissance is a word that means rebirth. During this time period, people became interested in art and learning. It was a period of creativity, new ideas, and inspirations. The Renaissance began in Italy because of so many trade routes that went through Italy. Goods from different parts of the world came through Italy, and this helps to spread people's interest and curiosity about a larger world. People's curiosity led to the start of the Renaissance period. Florence was the most important city, or most famous city in the Renaissance. It was the first city to grow rich from trade. Banking was also very important in Florence. Bankers actually in Florence set up a banking system that allowed merchants to know how much coins from different countries were worth. Bankers used the florin, or the gold coin of Florence, to measure the value of other countries' money. Venice was also a very important city during the Renaissance period. It was also a city that became rich through trade. In the 1300s, European scholars created a new way of understanding the world. It was called humanism, and it was based on the ancient Greek and Roman ideas. Humanists believed that individuals were important, and they wanted to use reason instead of religion to gain knowledge. That's a huge shift from when the Middle Ages was. Remember how much power the church had in the Middle Ages? This is a big deal. Humanism emphasized the abilities and accomplishments of human beings. The humanists believed that people are capable of great things. As a result, people of the Renaissance era admired artists, architects, writers, scientists, inventors, and other people who excelled or were very talented. Renaissance artists and art. Now, there are a ton of Renaissance artists, but we're going to talk about a couple of the main ones. Many Renaissance artists were humanists. Therefore, artists wanted to their paintings and sculptures to show people's emotions and unique personality. One of the most famous Renaissance artists is Michelangelo. Michelangelo was a famous Renaissance painter and sculptor. He tried to make his paintings and sculptures be very realistic. It is said that his sculptures, who are of humans, looked like they had feeling and emotion. One of his most famous sculptures is of David, the king of ancient Israel. So that's David actually from the Christian Bible. The statue of David can be found today in the city of Florence. Continuing with Michelangelo, Michelangelo also painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel with images from the Christian Bible. The Sistine Chapel is actually in the Vatican, which is in Rome. Michelangelo was alive during the golden age of the Renaissance period, which happened between 1490 and 1520. Leonardo da Vinci is probably one of the most famous Renaissance people of all time. He was not only a good painter and sculptor, but he was also an architect, a scientist, an engineer, and an inventor. He excelled in many different areas, which allowed him to be called the Renaissance man. That's a term you will hear every so often. It's still used today. But a Renaissance man is someone who can practically do anything well. So whatever Da Vinci wanted to do, he could do well. That's why we said he could paint, he could sculpt, he could invent, he could write. Anything he put his mind to, he usually did very well. Some of Da Vinci's most famous artwork includes the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. We'll spend a lot of time talking about Leonardo da Vinci in class. Renaissance science. In the early 1450s, Johann Gutenberg invented what was called the printing press, which used movable metal type. This machine could print books very quickly and cheaply. More books were available, therefore more people could read. For the first time, people could easily share ideas of the Renaissance to distant areas, and they could actually share what was going on in their world. The printing press allowed for the ideas of the Renaissance to spread beyond Italy. Renaissance literature. The most famous Renaissance writer was William Shakespeare. He is best known for his plays. His plays included 30 comedies, histories, and tragedies. The Reformation period. Reformation means religious reform or religious change. So you have to remember, in the Middle Ages, the Christian church had a lot of power. So keep that in mind as we talk about this change of the Christian faith. By the early 1500s, some Europeans had begun to complain about problems they saw in the Roman Catholic Church. These people believed that the church had become corrupt. Now, an example of this corruption is that the church was selling things called indulgences. Indulgences were payment to the church for the forgiveness of their sins. So the church would set up a set price for you, and if you gave them that amount, the church would say, oh, your sins are forgiven. Although many people called for the church reforms in other places, the Reformation started in Germany. One of the first people to protest against the Catholic Church was a German monk named Martin Luther. In 1517, Martin Luther nailed a list of complaints, which were called the 95 Theses, to the door of the church in Wittenberg. These complaints angered the church officials, and eventually Martin Luther was expelled from the church for this behavior. However, in response to Martin Luther being kicked out of the Catholic Church, Martin Luther and his followers formed a separate church. They became what was called, or those people became the first Protestants. Protestants were Christians who broke away from the Catholic Church over religious issues. So those people who left the Catholic Church are known as Protestants. Other reformers who followed Luther began to create their own church, or began to create churches on their own. The Catholic Church was no longer the only church in Western Europe. The Reformation created a division in Christianity. This diagram represents that division. And it's not really a division, but let's think of them two branches. So if we have the religion of Christianity here at the top, because of the Reformation, you now have two separate branches. You have the Catholic Church, and then you have the Protestant Church. Now, under the Protestant Church is where you get different denominations, or what they're called, or different types of churches. So some of those denominations include Baptist, Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, Episcopalian. We can go on and on. That's why I wrote etc. here. But you need to remember that because of the Reformation, there are two branches of the Christian church, or of Christianity: the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. Now, not only was there a Reformation and created a different branch of Christianity, but there was also a Reformation, or a change in the Catholic Church. Protestants were not the only ones who called for reform in the Roman Catholic Church. Many Catholic officials wanted to reform their church as well. The Catholic Reformation, therefore, was the series of those changes in the Roman Catholic Church. A part of the Catholic Reformation was that, or one part of it, was that leaders began to focus more on the spiritual concerns and less on the political power that the church once had.